In this chapter, we're going to learn how to use array lists. We got a hint of what array lists do in the last lesson. An array list is a data structure or container that allows us to store multiple values under the same name. This gives us lots of advantages because we can do things like write loops to access each item in the array list and not have to name each item individually like a variable, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and so on. This first lesson, I want to just discuss how to initialize array lists because it's quite a bit different than anything we've looked at before. The first thing we have to do is import the class into our program. So we do that by putting an import statement at the top, import java.util.ArrayList. And that gives us access to the ArrayList class. Then, to declare and initialize an array list, and we always do it in the same line, we type ArrayList followed by a less than sign, or sometimes I'll call this an open angle bracket, followed by a data type, string for example, followed by a space, the name of the array list, I'm going to call this one names, followed by an equal sign, followed by new, indicating that we're calling the constructor for a class object or an instance object. Then the name of the class, ArrayList, the data type again, inside angle brackets, followed by an open and closed parenthesis. The syntax is a little bit rough, and by rough I mean it's a little bit complex for what we're used to, but you'll get the hang of it soon. Let's look at another example. Let's say we want to do a list of integers. Notice that when I declare the data type after the keyword ArrayList, I use the full word integer even though we're used to declaring integers with int. The ArrayList class is looking for the class integer rather than the primitive data type integer. The difference between the two is a bit complex and is not necessary at this point in your learning of the Java language, but there is a difference. But to make it work correctly with ArrayList, we have to use the class name, which is capital I integer, and not the primitive data type int. So then we could write numbers if that's going to be the name of the array list, followed by the equal sign and keyword new, ArrayList, the data type, and open and close parentheses again. If we're going to do doubles and not integers, then it's the very same format. We just change the data type to double. We'll call this one nums. And again, notice that the data type double is spelled out with a capital D, which is different than the primitive data type, which starts with a lowercase d. Finally, we have to declare and initialize these array lists in one line because the compiler has to actually create the object when it's declared. So we can't declare an array list and then initialize it later. The compiler won't allow that. We have to do it in one line. And so every time we create an array list, we're going to follow this pattern, where we're going to declare the array list along with the data type and the name, and then we're going to call the constructor to create an actual reference to that array list. So that's how we initialize array lists. So we're going to move on to the next lesson where I teach you how to add data to an array list.